Evening, everyone. It's 5:30, Tuesday, November 24th. This is the regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education. Thanks for joining us. We have a couple of people on the phone tonight. A couple board members, Robin and Nikki, are joining us on the phone. Is there a motion for approval, is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Jim made a motion. Is there a second?
We also have a HR addendum.
Okay, Jim?
So moved with the HR addendum added into item 6B.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Jim and a second by Tracy. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. On to a guest presentation. We have Alexis Baxley here from the North Dakota School Boards Association, the executive director of that association. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Honoring somebody who is a part of your board and was a part of my board. I was a little afraid if I waited to do it too long, he might run away and not let me do it. So I am here tonight to present Mr. Jim Johnson with a plaque of appreciation on behalf of the North Dakota School Boards Association. Jim was a member of our board for 8 years. He's been a member of your board for quite some time. I have a full list of things that he has served on and years that he has been in leadership roles for us and you and in the national level. And I think what I just really want to say, rather than going through all of those things, is to say thank you for everything that you have done for our board. Thank you and thank you for the guidance that you have given me. NDSBA would not be the organization that it is today without Jim's many years of service. So with that, I am going to make him come down and accept the plaque from me, and again, thank you for allowing me to do this. If I get too sappy, he probably will just head on out and not let me give him his plaque. So. Thanks, guys.
Congratulations, Jim. Thank you for your service, and thank you, Alexis, for being here. And yes, safe travels on the way back home. The next item on our agenda is the recognition of the audience. We have 4 individuals have signed up to speak with us this evening. So at this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and address for the record. We would also ask that speakers refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee by name. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond or to debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 4 minutes. And I have Amber Matson on the list first. Is Amber here? Welcome. Thank you for being here. It's fine if you would like to remove it.
Thought of including Gladys Ray and my grandmother's legacy in Fargo Public Schools.
with many influential people in this community over the years. She had worked on a lot of programming and community efforts that all had common goals of bridging gaps in our community. Many people know of her, but wouldn't really hear a lot about her because she was so truly humble. Over the years, she worked on a variety of educational efforts with Fargo Public Schools, the city, and state levels, especially when the Indian Education Act passed back in the 70s. And it wasn't long after that she was quick to develop plans with Fargo Public Schools as parent and a grandparent, and took on the monumental task of reviewing all the textbooks, especially the history textbooks, to help with true history, and volunteered to help bring culture and awareness for students, for diversity and equality presentations throughout the Fargo Public Schools, and also on the collegiate level, and staff, and she was instrumental in various community action programs, some named Project Bridge. She was instrumental in starting the Nokomis Child Care Center. She was also awarded many awards for her efforts, such as she was one of the first Women of the Year for the YWCA, the Service to Mankind Award from Sertoma International, and the Fargo Human Relations Martin Luther King Award, the Minnesota Indian Education Lifelong Achievement Award, and many, many others, all showing dedication to the community and people who live here. And we see her influence and spirit still in this community, and she left a lasting impact on many. So we just wanted to thank the community for even considering her name. As I mentioned, she often said she lived in two worlds. She had a family who was blended, and she experienced a lot of adversity in this community, and she just faced it head on, and she just always was a true caring and loving person to the people that she worked with. And I just think that we see that more and more every day of communities coming together. And as I mentioned before, many people do remember her in this community, but I just wanted to shed some light on a little bit of who she was for maybe those who have never heard of her name before. So I hope that's helpful. But we just truly are humbled that her name is even being considered. And she had a big place in Fargo Public Schools' heart. She worked with a lot of people. And we're proud to be from here, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Amber, for being here. The next person to address us is Scott Paul.
Good evening. My name is Scott Paul. I live on Peterson Parkway in North Fargo. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you on this important topic. I'm a product of the Fargo school system and a proud NDSU graduate. I've spent the last 20 years serving our great country in the United States Air Force. I've had to make hard decisions with limited information, so I understand the difficult position that this school board is in. Prior to moving home to Fargo, my family watched the Las Vegas schools flail this spring with no clear plan for keeping students, teachers, and administrators safe. Comparatively, we were reassured to see the Fargo School Board establish and communicate a plan to emphasize health and safety by prioritizing the Cass County 14-day averages in order to drive the decision of full-time, hybrid, or distance learning. If I remember right, the threshold for full-time distance learning was 50 per 10,000. Today's average is 210. Unfortunately, as the North Dakota COVID cases began to rise, that plan and the prioritization of positive cases went out the window. What has taken its place is either poorly defined or poorly communicated. I understand that the research and the data regarding COVID has evolved. We know more today than we did in June. I also understand that as the data evolves, the plans must remain flexible, but the statistics should not be ignored or deprioritized. It appears that the original data-driven plan with clear and measurable thresholds was replaced by a political-driven plan that shifts responsibility away from the school board and puts it in the hands of others. Meanwhile, our state and county leaders make up new and convenient guidelines that often defy logic. For example, 2 states in the country have determined that if you're a close contact with someone who tests positive, you don't need to quarantine as long as you're wearing a mask. I'll let you go ahead and guess which same 2 states have the highest per capita positivity rates in the country. We live in one of them, and the other is South Dakota. If local health experts, Dr. Carson and Mr. Nessemeyer, were on the school board, I'd ask them if they agree that that guideline is an effective way to stop the spread of COVID, or whether or not that they agree that social distancing should no longer be a priority for schools. By the way, the CDC feels differently on those topics. Dr. Newman, I'd love to hear your opinion on that as the only health expert on the board, if you'd be willing. I stand here tonight embarrassed by the performance of our elected representatives and appointed officials at the state, county, city, and school board levels, each pointing at each other, hoping that the other will make the hard decision. I close by humbly asking you for 3 things tonight. Number 1, stop waiting for the city, the county, or the state to do the right thing. They've proven to us multiple times they don't have that capacity. You need to make the hard decisions based on what's best for our children, the teachers, and the school employees. Number 2, return to a data-driven plan with clearly defined thresholds. It doesn't need to be your original plan, and if you have to modify that plan 2 weeks from now, so be it. But stop passing the responsibility for the safety of our children, the teachers, and the employees off to someone else. And finally, my 3rd request, say a prayer for those who won't be with us on Thanksgiving. On Thursday, my family will sit down together, and we will be thankful for our many blessings. But there will be more than 400 empty seats around the tables in Cass County because of COVID-19. We've lost 118 of our friends and neighbors, and another 289 are in the hospital today fighting for their life. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Scott, for joining us. Lori Klein.
Good evening. My name is Lori Miller Klein. I live on 15th Avenue South in Fargo. Dr. Gandhi, President Knutson, fellow school board members, I am so grateful to you for allowing members of the public to speak to you tonight. There are only 2 reasons, I'm very confident there are only 2 reasons, that hundreds of people are not standing here tonight or standing outside the school building. Number 1, we're in the midst of the worst public health crisis of our lifetimes. We live in the middle of a region in the United States that is being affected more severely, measured by any metric you care to use, than any other region in the world in the history of this pandemic. Those hundreds of sensible people know that it is not safe for themselves or others in the community to gather in large groups anywhere in our state. The second reason they are not here tonight is because they do not believe you will listen to them. They have completed surveys, attended virtual meetings, filled out forms, submitted official requests, written countless letters and emails, made phone calls, and talked to you in person. And I believe they're right, because they have been watching you carefully and looking to you for help, and I have too. My husband and I raised 4 children here. That man brought me to this community 30 years ago this fall, and he promised me we would only stay 5 to 7 years. 18 years later, 12 years ago this month, he died too young of colon cancer. 10 years ago, I married my best friend in the world, and he went back to school so that he could fulfill a dream that I will never in my life understand. He is teaching middle school math here in Fargo, North Dakota. I'm here tonight to speak for him and all of the teachers, paraeducators, school staff, and dear parents who believe they are not being heard. After 8 months of watching Zoom and YouTube meetings, I know your names and faces and personalities better than I have known any leadership figures in this town for the last 30 years. I know you a little. I know that you care. I know that you are passionate about your work. And I know you love our kids and you love this town. But we have seen school board members accept text messages during school board meetings and steer the discussion toward a particular point of view on in-person learning. We have watched the teachers' union disengage from the COVID-19 instructional model committee rather than have teachers pitted against parents. At the last 3 COVID instructional model meetings, we watched representatives for parents, teachers, paras, and principals speak articulately, intelligently, and persuasively about their firsthand experiences in our schools. Sometimes they spoke without acknowledgement, and frequently they were voted down. At the most recent meeting, they were joined by the head of maintenance and operations, voting for a brief period of distance learning following Thanksgiving, and they were still voted down. And as a mother of 4, believe me, I know what it looks like when a person is not being listened to. And if you don't believe me, I beg you to put down your pen and your laptop and go watch those meetings with new eyes. Friends, we have come to a time we never could have imagined and a place that none of us wanted to be. The shifting strategies, priorities, and plans of the last 3 months have left us all dazed and confused and stressed beyond what we ever knew we could handle. We all need a reset. And I beg you for a reset. Please follow CDC guidelines for quarantine and isolation. Please put us in the lowest risk categories for school reopening according to the updated CDC guidance, which has changed to acknowledge the higher risks of in-person learning than we recognized when this first began. Please do not, under any circumstances, remove social and physical distancing requirements in our schools until our community spread indicators return to a much lower level. Please use all of your collective ingenuity and reach out to the most vulnerable and underserved in our school district. Find compassionate and creative ways to serve them and help them. We're entering the darkest phase of this pandemic. We know help is on the way, but it's not here yet. And we need your help to get us all safely to the other side. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lori. Max Summers.
Good evening. My name is Max Summers. I am a recent alumni of North Dakota State University and a first-year teacher teaching music at Ed Clapp Elementary School. I'm also involved in the Community Alliance for Responsible Education, also known as CARE, along with Ms. Lori Klein. I am here to raise my concerns about the current state of our in-person education in Fargo Public Schools. When I signed my contract at the beginning of this year, I did so with the belief that the COVID-related decisions being made at a district level would be made with the safety of myself, other faculty and staff, families, and students in mind. These last 3 months have done nothing but show me that my faith was misplaced. Initially, at the beginning of the year, the Fargo Public Schools Smart Restart Plan in place used a model based on the 14-day rolling average number of cases per 10,000 people. The magic number to send us online at that point was 50. When that number was approaching, and then hit, and then passed 50, we moved in the opposite direction to level 4, with more students in the building, despite the increase in cases in the county. As of today, that number, as mentioned earlier, 210.83, more than 4 times what the original number was that would have suggested that we were safer online. And yet, here we are. You don't need me to remind you that we are living in one of the worst COVID hotspots in the entire world. I'm sure that has been made clear to you already. Despite that fact, I'm supposed to put my health and safety, and not just my own health and safety, but that of all my students at risk by teaching in person next week. It has been widely reported that if an individual were to attend a Thanksgiving gathering of more than 10 people, there is a 50-50 chance that one of those individuals is a carrier of COVID-19. I teach 7 different sections of 15+ kids every day. You don't need a degree in statistics to know that my odds are pretty grim. What do I do if one of my students comes into the classroom and is a carrier of COVID-19? As mentioned before, we are one of 2 states in the United States that is not currently following the CDC guidelines for close contacts. So what do I do? What did I do when that happened? Absolutely nothing. November 9th, Monday, 2 weeks ago, I had a student in my class that I found out later that week was COVID positive and contagious. The principal let me know, said that all that I could do was monitor my symptoms, and a very immensely comforting good luck. Thank the stars that this student was one of the few that correctly wears their mask all the time, because otherwise I could be in a very different spot right now. Putting my own personal well-being aside for a moment, stop to consider the health and safety of all of my students. Through 2 days of our A-B schedule, I see 195 different students. If I were to potentially become a carrier of COVID-19, I could put all of those students at risk of contracting this disease before I even know. I get tested on campus at NDSU every Sunday, but the earliest that I've received my results is a Tuesday afternoon. So I could be asymptomatic, get tested on Sunday, teach 2 days of school, put 195 students and all of their families at risk, and not find out until after the fact. And the solution to this is to push rapid tests that have been reported to be wildly inaccurate among people who are asymptomatic. I'm not particularly convinced. This is an unreasonable amount of pressure to ask anyone to endure, and it is growing to be too much for me to handle. As a first-year teacher, I was under no illusions that this wouldn't be a tough year. But all of the extra weight that I am being asked to bear is simply too much. I have sacrificed my entire life outside of school to make sure that my students are safe when they come into my classroom. I cannot sleep through the night because of how much constant anxiety I feel for both my own safety and for that of my students. I personally have relapsed into substance abuse issues that I thought that I had conquered because I cannot cope with all that is being asked of me. And I know that I am not the only teacher in the district that feels this way. I emailed Dr. Gandhi directly yesterday and expressed my concerns, and there's a portion of his response that I would like to read to you and respond to myself. And this is a quote from our referring to Dr. Gandhi, Dr. Paul Carson, professors of infectious diseases at NDSU, administrators from West Fargo, Dr. Newman, and representatives from Fargo Cass Public Health. From our conversation, the recommendation and guidance we received was that schools transitioning to distance learning at this point without other community mitigation strategies in place may not be effective. This says to me that there is a lack of willingness to make the move to distance learning, to take direct action to truly protecting the safety of the public school community, because it may not be effective in reducing community spread. That, to me, is an utterly feckless abdication of responsibility. You are unwilling to make a tough choice to do something that will truly put the safety of the public school community as the primary concern in the decision-making process. It has been made abundantly clear that at the state level, there is very little that will be done to combat the uncontrolled spread of this virus. You have the opportunity to step up and make a decision to protect the safety of the most important members of our community. The mission statement of Fargo Public Schools is to achieve excellence by educating and empowering all students to succeed. How is putting students at risk of contracting this disease every day that they are in the building, empowering them to succeed? Mission statements, if not acted upon, simply become empty platitudes. The Smart Restart Plan was based on 4 guiding principles, one of which reads, ensuring the safety and well-being of all students and employees. And that sure feels like an empty platitude right now. The only way that we can truly protect the faculty, staff, families, and students from what will be a devastating spread of COVID-19 post-holiday is to move to distance learning. Anything short of that at this point is flat-out neglect of the most important population in our society, the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Feel free to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like, or if you need to take off. We completely understand that. Moving on to staff reports, our first report is on the Virtual Academy. That's memo 65 in our packet. Missy Eidsness and Dr. Gross, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Tonight, what we'd like to do is just give you a brief update on one part of our Smart Restart Plan, which is the Virtual Academy. Our Virtual Academy, over the course of the past few months, has certainly evolved and changed, and that's really the purpose of tonight's presentation, is to give you an update of where we're at and some of the thinking that we have moving forward around our Virtual Academy in the Smart Restart. But before we give you that update, we thought we would show a very short 1-minute video. Unfortunately, it is behind some of the board members, and I apologize. So you may have to turn your head to see this 1-minute video that talks a little bit about the Fargo Public School Virtual Academy.
It's a day that starts at 8:20 and ends at around 2:10 and is mixed with times where students are all together, just like they would be in a school classroom. It really is fascinating how easy the tech components are for so many of them. Fargo Public Schools continues to take the time to figure out a way to make sure that students can feel safe. And if students feel safe, they can learn.
So that was Lucas Steyer, who is one of our teacher leads, who has been creating content for science and social studies for all of our K through 5 teachers to use this year. And so as we go forward, he supports the Virtual Academy and he supports the science and social studies along with 2 other teachers. A couple of the pieces that I want to highlight on the elementary is that we started with Virtual Academy 1. And Virtual Academy 1, we have 676 students currently involved. Our largest enrollment is at first grade with 128, and then we have 88 is our smallest at kindergarten. And so as we look at that, one of the most challenging parts of the Virtual Academy was flexing staff between our brick and mortar and our Virtual Academy. We currently have 35 teachers in the Virtual Academy, which includes classroom teachers and special education teachers. We have 3 lead teachers that support the district with the distance learning that goes on with all students and the Virtual Academy. We also share 12 teachers who teach in brick and mortar and also support virtual learning in our areas such as PE, GT, music, EL, and art as we go forward. And additional 2 teachers that support MTSS, which is supporting students who need interventions. So when we take a look at that, Virtual Academy 1, it is Fargo Public Schools teachers. We have created schedules. We have A significant portion of the day is synchronous, meaning the teacher is working live with students. One piece that happened is we had many parents comment that there's a need for a different model of virtual academy where they could have more choice on when they sat down with their student for virtual learning. And that became the creation of Virtual Academy 2. Virtual Academy 2, we're working with a company, and it's called Calvert for elementary, where they have the curriculum aligned, but it's all asynchronous, and a family can choose when they participate in it. And they have scheduled sessions with their teacher for support as they go forward. As for the elementary, this is our largest elementary in Fargo, is our Virtual Academy this year. We have hired a Virtual Academy Dean of Students for the day-to-day contact and follow-up as we go forward. And we still have other pieces that we are looking at for continual improvement. So just kind of wanted to give you an overview of the two options that we have and the size of the Virtual Academy for elementary.
As we talk about numbers of students who are part of the Virtual Academy, just to give you an understanding, as of Friday, we had 1,501 students, K through 12, who were part of our Virtual Academy opportunities. So that's 332 students in grades 9 through 12, 442 students in grades 6 through 8, and 737 students in K through 5. And that is a very large number of students who are being provided an opportunity to receive their education in a virtual setting. Missy talked a little bit about Virtual Academy 1 and 2 at the elementary. I'd like to do the same and talk a little bit about our Virtual Academy 1 and 2 at the middle school, and then I'll follow up finally with our planning at the high school. At the beginning of this school year, families were given the opportunity to sign up their students for a middle school Virtual Academy, which is staffed by Fargo Public School teachers. So what we did near the beginning of the school year is we found 12 instructors, 4 in grade 6, 4 in grade 7, 4 in grade 8, who agreed to be part of the Virtual Academy opportunity for our students. And then our building principals said, okay, without those teachers at the middle school, we needed to go back and reschedule all of our students and place them into different courses or a different schedule. So the amount of work that was done by our staff and by our principals was a tremendous lift, but they did a wonderful job in that process. In the Middle School Virtual Academy 1, we emphasize English language arts, math, and science in a synchronous fashion. So there is a schedule where students and their teachers Zoom together synchronously, and then there are asynchronous opportunities or assignments that students work on over the course of the week. As we progress through the Middle School Academy this year with our middle school, we found that we needed more interventions and extensions for the students who were served at the middle school VA. So we designed what is called the Virtual Learning Center, which during a time in the student's schedule, all of the teachers who are part of that Virtual Academy, plus 5 retired teachers that we have coming back in, and we're paying to work with students in interventions and extension opportunities to really help all students be as successful as possible. As the year continued, we had more families who wished to be part of the Fargo Public Schools Middle School Virtual Academy, and we came to the point where truly we were at the maximum number of students per teachers, and that ratio that we would want to support. So we developed a second middle school virtual academy, which we called Virtual Academy 2. It is more of an asynchronous model, like Missy talked about at the elementary, same at the middle school. We use a set of coursework called Edmentum, and students work on that independently, but at least once a week, they are connected with a science, a social studies, a language arts, and a math instructor to make those connections, to answer questions, and to really get to the heart of what students might need. Then, as the year progressed, we saw one more need that we had, which was the opportunity for elective opportunities, like in the area of art, PE, music, and so on. So right now, we have working groups together who are planning to roll out at the beginning of second semester opportunities for our students in those areas. Jodelle Teichen, who presented to the board last time we were together, is leading that. And we have fairly sound plans working forward to, again, increase those opportunities. These would be things that students would be able to do in addition to that core area of math, science, language arts, and social studies. So that's kind of the evolution at the middle school and where we are moving. At the high school, we began the school year utilizing the North Dakota Center for Distance Education. It is an online high school in the state of North Dakota. And any student who, at the high school level, who wished to take part in a virtual academy was enrolled in coursework at the North Dakota Center for Distance Ed. Our plan is to allow students to enroll and hopefully successfully complete up to 6 courses through the NDCDE. To do so, because it is a self-paced process, what we did is we had students enroll in 2 classes at a time, and then once they successfully completed or are close to successfully completing a course, we enroll them in their next. So over the course of a semester, we're hoping that students will get those 6 credits, which will keep them on track for graduation. There were a few exceptions to that, and that would be if a student was involved in a physical education class, because we wanted that to extend over the course of the entire semester, or an AP level course, which we wanted students to be able to explore for a longer period of time. Students who enrolled in those courses actually were given the opportunity to enroll in 3 North Dakota Center for Distance Ed courses. Just like elementary and middle school, we are seeing that we need to make some adjustments or shifts to our high school plan as well. So just today, and again on Monday morning, I'm working with the high school principals to say what Virtual Academy 2 could or should look like for second semester. We've received feedback that there is a portion of our student population where the North Dakota Center for Distance Ed is working very, very well. We don't want to take that away from students. But for some, they need a little bit more structure in their day, and they need more connection with their FPS staff members. So we're working on a plan to provide a second option for high school students that would schedule time during the day that they would have for their courses, and that then we would connect with our Fargo Public School staff. So giving options for students who need more of an asynchronous opportunity, those who need more of a structured opportunity. And we'll continue to do that, and our plan then would be to roll that out for second semester. So that is kind of the evolution of the Virtual Academy at the elementary, middle school, and high school. And as we continue down this path of saying what is next, hopefully we've taken in the feedback from our community and our stakeholders to make some of those changes.
Thanks to both of you for the report. Does anyone have questions or comments? Jennifer?
Thank you. Bob, I have a couple of follow-up questions to some of the last information that you shared. So the updates coming for second semester for high school students, you mentioned there will be opportunities for them, probably through Zoom, I'm assuming, to connect with instructors. Now, is that going to be an opportunity for those that are already enrolled, or is it going to be opened up for all students to participate?
So as we look at the Virtual Academy for second semester, yet to be named what the second version will be, it still will be an asynchronous opportunity where students will work through probably an Edmentum type of curriculum material, but we will support that with our own staff, so highly qualified staff in the areas of language arts, math, science, and social studies, who will then have time in their day and time in the student's day that they can Zoom together, they can ask their questions, or through other means if it's an email and other communication. So trying to provide a more of a structured approach. So for example, period 2, I might be assigned to mathematics. Period 4, I might be assigned to social studies. And then we would work to find some staff members who would be willing to help those students along the way.
So if I can ask a clarifying follow-up, so the staff members that you would look for in this case, period 2 and 4, would those then be staff members that had those periods open, or are they already teaching a math course in period 2?
So again, this is a plan that is in the works.
Yeah.
And what we would look for is people who would be willing to, during a time that they might have a preparation period, with additional compensation to work with students. So they would continue with their 5 classes that they teach, and then we would look for individuals in those 4 core areas to provide the support for the VA2.
Does anyone else have questions? Robin or Nikki, do you have any questions?
The audio cut out.
Let's start with Robin. Do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. How about you, Nikki?
I don't have any questions, but I missed a little bit of it because the audio cut out.
Fortunately, we do have a recording of our meetings. I wonder if that'll work for you, or do you have a specific question that you need to ask?
No, I'll go back and take a listen.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you very much for the update, both of you, and for all the work that you're doing. The next item is the COVID-19 Instructional Plan Committee update. Dr. Gandhi and Dr. Newman, and there is a handout for us titled COVID-19 Instructional Plan Committee Update, November 24th. That's at our table here. So who would like to start?
I'll hand it over to Dr. Newman.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I was just asked to update you guys at our meetings every couple weeks, so I probably won't read through the entire thing. There's a lot of data here if you're interested. I was just going to summarize our November 16th, our most recent meeting with the COVID-19 Instructional Plan Committee. We started with Brenton, our Fargo Cass Public Health epidemiologist presenting Cass County data. Essentially, the numbers are increasing across the board in our county, unfortunately. Similar to previous weeks, the highest rate of case increases we saw was in the 20 to 29-year-olds. Of note, there was an approximate 5% increase in ages under 18 years since Halloween. And then he stressed community responsibility with urging people to wear masks and avoiding large gatherings, staying home when sick, abiding by the quarantine for 14 days, and to please get your flu shot. And then we had Doug present our HR data he presents the staff data from Fargo Public Schools. So since the previous Friday, which would have been the 14th at 10 a.m., we had 18 staff who were positive and 19 out. Interestingly, there had been 19 staff out 2 weeks ago as well, so that was kind of holding steady. Then we had data presented around teachers and paras out by the grade band, and overall it was pretty stable compared to 2 weeks prior. Teachers and paras, however, out due to quarantine had increased across the board when you looked from 2 weeks prior, and our substitute fill rate had increased for teachers and slightly for paras. And then he explained to us a little bit about the sub-license process, some of the median campaign efforts we might have, and some bonuses for substitutes. And then Mackenzie reviewed our student data since the previous Friday, again on the 14th. She pulls the data at 10 a.m. We had 26 positive students and 41 in quarantine. Of interest, this had decreased in every grade band from the previous data. And she noticed a trend of increasing household contacts and contacts due to team sports, but not a lot of spread within our school buildings. And then I presented data from a meeting that was held, I think you all received information about this, with the Fargo Public Schools and West Fargo Public Schools, Public Health, myself, and Dr. Paul Carson. This was summarized in detail in Dr. Gandhi's email to you guys on November 13th, so I won't go through that. I'm also writing a second piece for our newsletter that will go through in detail the thought process and some of the discussions from this meeting. The short version here summarized for you is that numbers are increasing, nationwide and certainly within our county. The recommendations for schools have changed from various expert groups. There is new data to say that kids are in fact spreading this virus, but this is still thought to be small when compared to the entire community spread. And there's just been a lot of dialogue in various expert groups, both physician and public health and education, about where schools should fall in the sequence of events of mitigation strategies. And the overarching consensus at this time is that mitigation measures in communities should feature school closures as a last resort, reserved only for emergency situations. It is really urged that we have to try to have other things closed first, including bars, restaurants, other establishments, with an effort to keep our children in-person learning. And local public health and medical experts, as well as state guidance, recommended at this meeting that Fargo Public Schools stay the course and just stay at our current levels and not look to bring back our middle and high school students until January of next year. So the committee then voted at this meeting, we were looking at going virtual after Thanksgiving versus staying in our current levels and perhaps enduring rolling closures if needed. Rolling closures are the idea that you would close certain classrooms or certain buildings even if staff or if it was needed due to quarantine instead of closing the entire district. And that was what was voted in favor of, staying in our current levels. So elementary will remain in person 4 days a week and distance on Fridays, and middle and high school will remain in hybrid. The target date to look to bring kids back or reevaluate the plan is still January 19th. That is the start of the second semester. And it's also allows us a full incubation period of both staff and students, giving us a 2-week out from that extended winter holiday. We will continue to monitor the numbers carefully, as we always do, and then our next meeting will be on December 7th, with hopefully a later data pool. One of the things, we're trying to allow extra time after Thanksgiving to see what the numbers do, and it was asked that McKinsey and others pull the data maybe on a Sunday night or even that morning versus the 48-hour previous on a Friday, which they were willing to do. I don't know if you want to add anything, or I'm happy to take any questions.
Sure. I'll just add, and I think it's important to recognize kind of I guess some of the speakers and what's being shared with board members both. I know that you guys receive feedback both from individuals. I think that we shouldn't have deserted our plan to bring students back, and then you also receive feedback that we should be distance learning after Thanksgiving break. The emotions that you heard tonight and the speech that you heard tonight, that's true amongst a lot of our staff. Our staff are going above and beyond. They're working extremely hard, and they continue to carry the stress. And I think what I keep telling myself, and I had a conversation with the teacher yesterday as well, is what do we do in a situation where this fear continues to rise, and rightfully so, because of what's happening in our community, but yet the guidance that we continue to get from not only state leadership, but also local health officials continues to be to keep schools open. And that's really the dilemma that we are in. That is not to discount the fact that we do have staff getting burnt out. This is tiring. We are relying often on our staff. We're providing additional compensation to cover extra classes for subs, but that's not something that everyone can do right now. And that's not something that we should always have an expectation for teachers, because we don't want, we've heard the phrase that teachers right now are feeling oftentimes what they feel towards the end of the year. And we need to be able to recognize that too. But I think for me, it goes back to what is the purpose of our committee, and what are we making our decisions off of? Even yesterday from Fargo Cast Public Health, the epidemiologist that we work with sent us something that said that even currently, although we've seen minimal school-to-school spread, it's not zero, it is extremely minimal. Today, as of today, we have 23 or 30 students that are out due to a positive out of our 11,000 students, and we have 21 staff members. We have 137 staff members that are out on quarantine and 231 students that are out on quarantine, but we're just not seeing that secondary exposure because of a school environment. So for us, we have to continue balancing what we know about in-person instruction. We have to continue balancing the guidance that we're getting, and that's going to be part of our decision-making process. One thing I think our committee has proven is that our committee isn't afraid to make decisions or to change if the guidance changes. We, as a district, have started in hybrid. We've switched to distance learning. We've come back. We've created a plan. We've changed the plan. That's because the committee recognizes that guidance data and research can change, and I think that's part of the flexibility of our plan as well. But I think we also have to recognize what is the purpose of the committee and what does a decision by a committee mean. I think when the committee was created originally, the purpose was that we really thought the committee would work with Fargo Cass Public Health. They have an epidemiologist on the committee to understand what's happening, look at the data, and then kind of share that back out, which is why anytime that we make a decision regarding an instructional model, we will provide that rationale as well. Unfortunately, we do live in a society where information is available at our fingertips, and oftentimes there is a social dilemma. You can get information catered to whatever your own personal beliefs are, and we have committee members that have come with feeling like they have to represent what the will is of that group that they represent, whether it's parents, whether it's teachers, or something else. I don't join that committee as what I think should be the will of superintendents. If I was representing a superintendent in a group, I think part of that is I have to listen and look at what the community is doing as well. And I think that's one of the things that I'm going to ask our committee, or most members of our community, is we know that there's different opinions on this, but please allow us to work with local health. We are now in a situation in Fargo Public Schools where we have a Facebook group that's really pushing in an organized campaign to transition to distance learning. We have a Facebook group that's approving, really pushing to go to in-person instruction. We've had teachers that say that they felt the committee wasn't going in the right direction in the way that they wanted to go, so they've left. We've also had a parent that's left the committee because we didn't make a decision to go to in-person instruction yet. So there really are opposing views on every side of this, but I think the best course of action for us, unless otherwise directed by the board, for me personally in my decision-making process, is going to continue to say, look at the guidance that we're receiving from Fargo Cass Public Health. Let's look at the numbers that we're getting in our district as well. And if that guidance changes, if we're supposed to not follow kind of the guidance that we're getting from state leadership, the guidance that we're getting from local health officials as well, I would just seek that direction from the board. But that's just a little bit of kind of the situation that we're in right now, and we know it's emotional, we know it's tough. And I don't blame anyone for the way they feel, because COVID-19 is tiring. It is on all of us, and it's something that we need to be able to recognize. But I think we have to kind of go back to what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish, and then what is the metric that we're using for those decisions.
Thank you, both of you. Any members of the board have questions or comments at this time? Any of the board members in person, and then I'll check with Robin and Nikki to see if they have any questions. Okay. Robin, do you have any questions at this time?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you, Robin. How about you, Nikki?
I do not, thanks.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions at this time. Thank you so much for the detailed information. And we know that you are both available for questions down the road if we have them after this meeting. Jennifer Mastrud, would you like to please come up for the FEA report?
Good evening. I haven't been here since September 22nd. COVID entered our house very quickly and effortlessly, took out many of us in our family. And then between conferences, this is my first time in 2 months, so it's nice to see you all here. First, I want to let you know that I know Kim Belgard, my vice president, has been here reporting off. We have started the Fill Your Cup program within our educators. So 900 educators put in information about their colleagues that they want to fill their cups with joy, because we know during this time we are all feeling very depleted. So this month in November, we did have educators that selected Carol Moss of Jefferson Elementary and Penny Donut of Discovery. Both of them happen to work in the library, so we know how important literacy is, so it's great to see those two selected for this Fill Your Cup program. Wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on within our buildings as far as staffing concerns go. I know at the last COVID committee we talked about rolling closures. I will tell you that it's not just COVID-related absences that are happening. We are seeing other viruses that are out there. People are getting sick, and we are seeing some mental health burnout. So when we look at those small portions that are out, I don't think we're getting a really good reflection of actually what's happening in our buildings. We have many teachers who, when we have people that are gone, they will sub 5, 6, 10 class periods in a week. That takes away from their professional practice time, which is so paramount to making sure they design lessons and instructions that are important for their kids for differentiation at that time. So we're starting to cut into that, and I think that's why we're starting to see the burnout that we do within our classrooms. So we have to really get that under control, and unfortunately, we're not seeing the subs knock on the door in order to come in, and we're starting to see that need pile up. One of the biggest concerns that have come out recently is kind of the strategy in order to get these classrooms covered. I believe it is if you cover one class period, you get a certain stipend. And then if we merge 2 class periods together, you get double stipend. And then we merge maybe 3 class periods together. That goes against mitigation strategies, even if it's in a larger room. And secondly, that is not instructional time being provided wisely. That all of a sudden just becomes a holding spot for these kids and students to go, because a teacher cannot effectively teach 3 different subjects in a 40-minute time slot. So that's really been concerning to staff, is to seeing that coming out. So we're worried that staff maybe are starting to feel depleted. They're not wanting to cover class sections that are open. And then when we talk about rolling closures of staff being gone, when does that actually get announced? It's really hard to determine until the day of, similar to a snowstorm. So we would hate to have our families put in that bind when an administrator decides to close those doors. So those are really some of the big things that are a struggle right now in the buildings, of why you're hearing the staff morale is because of that extra burden of making sure to cover our buildings to make sure our students have safe spots to be. What we're asking for as educators is we just want to have some clear metrics set. We talk about collecting data, we talk about having guidelines, thresholds, and I think that those are really important so that the community is aware, the teachers are aware, the families are aware of where are those cut scores going to be. No different than if I'm looking at an ELO, I might give a 3.5 or a 2.75. We need to know where those cut scores are, and I think that's also where we're starting to hear a lot of the frustrations and the burnout that's happening within staff, because they're not sure where those are going. So we would ask that we would start to follow maybe a federal guideline, maybe follow the CDC guidelines at a federal level within our area, maybe look at those guidelines and then set clear metrics as to what that would be for each individual area. We would ask that the COVID committee starts looking at that. We also would really like to push a joint message between the educators, the administrators, the cabinet, and the school board to make a really clear stance that our community needs to step up and support us. We've heard this constantly, that if our community is not behind us to support our opening our doors and supporting education, it really looks like the kids are being the sacrificial pieces here. We need to all work together in order to address our city commission leaders in order to say, what can you do more? What leadership can you do to help make our city safe and get our numbers down so that our students can be back in school? I also want to say that last week, Cabinet and leadership did do a really awesome thing for staff. They treated them as professionals. If you want to make a teacher happy, you treat them as a professional. That's all they need. They don't need extra gratitudes and cupcakes and thank yous. But last week, our staff were given the opportunity finally to give themselves a safe space to work on Fridays during distance learning days if they met certain criteria in order to work with students. And all I heard from staff is, this was an amazing opportunity so that I could feel as in a safe spot, work with my students, and all that's going to do is catapult them to continue to go above and beyond within our schools. So tonight, I just ask for action. Reach out to people that are in leadership roles. You all have connections in order to get them to support our community efforts to drive down the COVID numbers so that teachers and students and families can feel safe in our buildings. And I also ask that we start to set thresholds on that committee that are usable data from community spread, from nations, from CDC to CITRAP to the World Health Organization that we can actually use and play in part here in Cass County. Thank you, and I hope you guys all have a very well and restful Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. Superintendent's report, Dr. Gandhi.
Sure. I think I'll start today with, first and foremost, one of the biggest changes that happened over the weekend. Just to give a brief timeline, on Saturday, Fargo Public Schools, I was notified of an opportunity to provide Binax rapid testing for COVID-19 for all of our staff. From the state leadership, we are grateful for the governor's office and the Department of Public Instruction to provide this opportunity. They did tell us that we would like to start testing all of your staff beginning on Monday, and we were notified this on Saturday, so it's a pretty big undertaking, and to be able to do this weekly testing for all of our staff. our team came together, created a plan, spent all day Saturday and Sunday, and one of the main reasons that we were able to pull this off is because of the assistance from Fargo Cass Public Health and the North Dakota National Guard. So I just want to extend my gratitude. They are staffing those testing events. Those testing events started yesterday at the Shack. We had one yesterday evening from 4:30 to 7:30. We have another one this evening, and tomorrow we have one from 8 to noon. At yesterday's event, last night, the first event that we had 181 staff members tested. We had 4 positives of those 181. 3 of those positives were symptomatic. So we had 1 asymptomatic staff member that we were able to catch through that Binex testing. So we're just really grateful for that opportunity, but again, we were able to pull it off because of Fargo Cass Public Health. I believe the expectation is for Fargo and West Fargo school districts to continue providing these opportunities on a weekly basis. So that will be communicated out as we get more information as well, both from the state and then as we plan those testing events. The second update I just wanted to provide is the State of the Schools Address and Public Focus Group. That will be a virtual event this year for Fargo Public Schools. That will be held on Thursday, January 14th, 2021. We will focus on a lot around the instructional calendar. One of the things that we're able to do this year because of the governor's executive order is to be able to provide distance learning day, distance learning to count towards instructional time in Fargo Public Schools. This was something that was almost allowed at the last legislative session, but the bill narrowly failed, and we do anticipate another bill coming up this year that would allow for distance learning to count for instructional time. Should that bill get passed, one of the questions that we're going to ask our community is around snow days and inclement weather days. Should those be distance learning? And if so, how does that impact decisions a calendar committee would have to make? Whether do we no longer build in snow days to the calendar? Additionally, by the transition from the last legislative session to turn from instructional time being counted by how many days you have to be in school to hours, that provides some flexibility to provide additional teacher development, plan for student interventions for our students as well. So we'll be focusing on some questions around that at our State of the Schools and Public Focus Group event. So it will start with a 20-minute asynchronous video providing an update of our schools, but then there will be live virtual Public Focus Group events facilitated with board members, administrators, and Fargo Public Schools staff as we have done in the past. So Anne Marie and her team do a phenomenal job of putting together that event. Now they have to do it virtually, so just be on the lookout for more information about that as well. So those are the 2 major updates that I had for my update today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Anyone have questions? Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. And do you want to take a break after the consent agenda before we get into our business? Okay, Dr. Gandhi, do you have one item?
No, I was just going to say that you might, when you get into your business item, you might be able to take a natural break there, so just letting you know about that.
That sounds like a plan. Okay, is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. So let's take a brief break now, and we'll come back and get into our business item. All right, it's 6:45. Let's get started again with the business section on our agenda. And Nikki and Robin, you're still with us?
I'm here, thank you. And I'm here as well.
Okay, good. All right, this is the school renaming discussion. Memo 68 goes along with this business item. We are going to open up the discussion this evening, welcoming David Berkman. And David, if you would like to come to the podium, that would be wonderful. There's a handout that was going around. It's I think 3 sheets stapled. Just, does every board member have this handout that I'm holding up? Tracy, did you end up getting it? All right, Seth, thank you everyone for sharing. So David Berkman, if you would like to get us started, that would be great. We'll have some opportunity for some questions if we have them from Mr. Berkman, and then some additional dialogue before we get into our exercise that we're going to be doing. So welcome.
Very good. Thank you for the invitation to be here tonight, school board and superintendents. My name is David Berkman, principal at Woodrow Wilson High School. We have been having conversations with the Woodrow team regarding the renaming, following the new policy around it, and trying to have some input to share with you. I will briefly share up our high-tech in the world of Google surveys and whatnot, just using some dot matrix voting in our main office, 2 pages of students and staff being able to submit votes next to a particular name. So when you do see the voting, you see the number tallies halfway down the page. It is from a dot consensogram work. At the top of the cover page, a list of 5 do's, and they're please do's, requests from staff and students. Considering a name that makes students proud, applies anywhere in the world. That applies anywhere in the world is, we have a staff member who had her own daughter graduate from Woodrow and promptly decided that Florida is the place to be, and moved to Florida, and that student traveling far across the country and then bringing a high school diploma to a place of employment and a post-secondary institution that didn't know or familiar with Fargo, and also looking for an apartment, having a name that is transferable anywhere in the whole world, and is a positive reflection. Considering regional geography, please consider a name that's easily understood and doesn't need to be explained, and then a name that flows well. Under the please don'ts request from staff, a lot of wrestling with the historical figure or person, just general concern about if it will be able to stick, and the concern about if it is named after a historical figure or person, that we're not looking at another name change because more is known about the person. Please don't rename for an existing region or state high school name. Number 3 was putting community into it. Of the packet that you have, pages 2, 3, and 4 are a very interesting history of Woodrow Wilson High School put together by former teacher and counselor Alan Peterson. And it has a lot of information, a lot of facts to it, and the use of community and when did community leave the name of Woodrow Wilson High School, and West Fargo having their own community high school. I believe he finished it in 1998, so you're looking at a document that is not hot off the press. It is from 1998 in his historical research of the name Woodrow Wilson and the school. From students and staff, we would prefer not to have alternative or academy in the naming. Again, the staff member's daughter who goes to Florida and applies for a job at anything from a business office, bank, fast food, and they see, hi, I'm student X from Fargo, North Dakota, and here's my alternative high school diploma. we celebrate what we do, but we would prefer not to have the name alternative in the naming of the school if possible. And then academy, a similar piece. Anytime we see a transcript of somebody who has come from an academy, it causes one to look in deeper, meaning it's inviting deeper scrutiny for it just being, it's a high school diploma. And our students put the labor in to earn that high school diploma, the same number of credits at Davies North or South, and it is a high school diploma, not an academy or an alternative diploma. And then again, asking not a name that requires an explanation. You're able to see some the results of the consensus building that we did. Top vote getter getting with Dakota High School, Voyager. Rise Academy, we had votes calculated, but student and staff input was we would prefer not to see the academy name. And the Rise High School, RISE, what is the connotation for I graduated from Rise High School? So the request was to strike that from our list that was list of top 10. Finally, at the bottom, there were some spontaneous, I put down amalgamated or some combined naming. Dakota Valley High School Voyagers, maybe a Dakota Prairie High School Voyagers, Pioneers, or Mavericks. And that is the results of a few weeks of conversation with Woodrow staff and students. So we do appreciate you sharing the conversation with us as we're seeking a new identity. So.
Thank you, Mr. Berkman. Does anyone have questions? David.
David, explain to me the issue you had with academy. Does academy not seem to me mean as much as high school? I thought that was a pretty good alternative, or new name.
It invites deeper conversation of what you attend. I attend an academy, and the feeling from the kids and the staff is we're a public high school that is an alternative pathway to getting the diploma. And as an academy, it's inviting scrutiny of the who and what we are. And again, these are asks in the list that you see. I don't know if anybody regionally would be able to say, can you name for me in a Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, an academy? Maybe St. Thomas Academy in the Twin Cities. It's just.
I think, David, and I don't want to speak on behalf of your staff because I wasn't part of this activity, but personally, I think just from my experience in education, oftentimes academy is associated with a program. We are calling our program at Lewis and Clark the Explorer Academy at Lewis and Clark versus a school. And that may or may not be true for institutions across the nation, but oftentimes academy is associated with a program. So it just gives someone a moment of pause on initial reaction. And again, that's just my experience. I don't want to speak on behalf of your staff.
David?
Another question, David. Woodrow has never had a mascot, have they?
They have not.
Did you have any discussion about, along with a name, choosing a mascot like the other high schools have?
We did, and that is the results of that conversation, which were today finalized. It was, how does this all flow together? And you see some of the proposals of combining names that are on your list, the Voyagers or the Pioneers or the Mavericks. There's a moderate to high interest in having a mascot.
Thank you for that, the answer to that question. Does anyone else have questions? Jennifer?
Thank you. Thank you, David. I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about the conversations around the name Ohana? it caught my attention on the list, and the meaning caught my attention, and so I see that it was rated relatively high here by both students and staff, and has a couple community votes too, so I'm just curious if there's more that you could share around that dialogue.
I think we'd have to blame is the Disney movie Moana. What is the recent Disney movie with Disney movie Hawaii?
What is it? Lilo and Stitch.
Lilo and Stitch. It was after Lilo and Stitch. So the interest on the student side was that Ohana means friend in Hawaiian, and it also equally means nobody is left behind. And that the concept of that at Woodrow would be a very strong concept with students, resonates very firmly with them. Friend, and no one gets left behind.
Seth?
I would just ask your opinion, David, given that she had to ask that question, even though there did get some votes on there from students and staff, would you say that that doesn't square with don't choose a name that requires an explanation?
Agreed.
Okay. I just wanted to ask your opinion on it.
Yep.
Tracy, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to add, I read Ohana means family, but I don't know. Another nice.
Could you expand a little bit more, Mr. Berkman, regarding the historical figures, and then that kind of leads also into explanation. I suppose lots of these, almost any name potentially could require explanation because it's a story about a person, or it's maybe a description, like if it were Valley High School or Journeys High School or Voyager, we might want to tie in, a story with why was the name chosen for the school? How does it depict the character of the school? So, but could you talk, I suppose it's because of the recent sensitivity in terms of the reason that we were removing the name Woodrow Wilson. Maybe is that the additional sensitivity to choosing a name of a person for the school?
Correct. And if it was revisited in 5 or 10 or 20 years, 30 years or 40 years, it's an unsettling process that we are growing through, and there are a lot of positives to it as well. But if we think about South or North or Davies and a name change involved a Kennedy, an Agassiz building, it's a large undertaking, a lot of energy to put into it. So the concern would be that at some point in the future that something additional is found out about the namesake, and it's proposed to the school board to look at it for renaming. And with all historical figures, that is a potential.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else that's here in person have questions before I check with Robin or Nikki? Nikki, how about you? Do you have any questions for Mr. Berkman?
Thank Mr. Berkman for coming. I certainly appreciate that. I don't have anything additional at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Robin, how about you?
No, thank you. I'm good.
All right, great. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to open up an opportunity for those of us here, if there are any comments that any of us want to share, any questions that any of us have before we get into our exercise, which is going to be a forced ranking exercise. That's the explanation to our community. If you're all wondering why we have laptops sitting in front of us when we usually don't, it's because we're going to be working on the exercise on our laptop, and then we will be able to get to the results of our decision. Getting down to, the goal is to get down to 5 names at the end of this meeting, that then those names will be basically finalists for our next meeting. So are there any board members that have any comments or questions that you'd like to share before we get started? Tracy.
Sure, I'll just make a comment. I've shared at our committee before. I really appreciate this feedback, and I think it's, I didn't even consider the use of community or alternative or academy, so thank you for that. It makes a lot of sense. And I also really appreciate the idea of not naming things after people. We've had dialogue about that at our committee. However, I will be voting a different way tonight just because I would like to bring balance to existing structures and buildings that we have, because we aren't going to go back and rename every single thing. And there are a lot of things in our society and our community named after white men. And so I would like to see people elevated that are women and that are Indigenous and people of color. And so I will probably vote, or I know I will vote in that manner. Although I think the concept of naming after ideas is a good one, but until we can do that across the board, I'd like to see some balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Anyone else have comments? Robin, do you have anything to share?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, how about you, Nikki?
I do not, thank you.
All right. Let's see, we all have the laptop in front of us. We were sent instructions with a little exercise that we went through to help familiarize ourselves with the process here. I see we first need to enter in our name, our first and last name here to get us started. Anne Marie, is there anything that you need to share with us before we get started? And we'll take a break while we're working on this, but we'll work on it on our own, but we'll be in a break. Anne Marie, anything that needs to be given to us for directions?
If you guys have any questions, let us know of how to complete that. Stephen Duro is here as well, who created the program. So if you have anything you have questions on as we go along, we'd be happy to come over and help. But know that if for some reason you select incorrectly, you can just toggle over and hit the other selections. Or if you go back and you're like, whoa, nope, I've changed my mind, you can go back. Correct, Stephen? Yep, he's nodding his head. You could go back to one of the names and go back and change your answers if you had second thoughts. So know that your first selection won't lock you in forever.
And Robin and Nikki, with their participation on the phone, they are set up to be able to complete this exercise as well. Correct, Anne Marie?
Yep, they have the link, and they were able to access that in advance to be able to make sure that they had that, and so they're going to be able to do that as well. And once you guys are done, we will be able to tabulate those results electronically, so we will be able to get that top 5 for you.
Great, so we will have full participation this evening. Jim?
Yeah, I don't know if this question is for Stephen or for Anne Marie, but once we complete and we've gotten down to Y, is there a button we're supposed to hit to actually submit it? Okay, thank you.
You're done once you hit all of those, and then your screen tells you in that matrix, it would have a blank box if for some reason you skipped over one by accident. So your results would be on your screen there as well as you go along. It will come up.
Okay, then any other questions? All right, it's 7 o'clock. We're not in a rush, so do the work as you feel like you need to. Check your notes if you have some notes that you've written down, and we'll look forward to the results. And keep in mind, we're in a little break here while we're doing our work. Thank you. Second. Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we're getting started again here. It is 7:40. And Robin and Nikki, are you both on the phone?
I am. Thank you.
Okay. All right, good deal. We're just moving
Yes,
around.
thank you.
We're just moving around a little bit here so that, because we're going to put the results will be put on the screen here so everyone can see. So we're just moving around a little bit, and we'll turn it over. Anne Marie and Steve?
Sure, so we'll do the report side of this, and as he clicks on your report, you will see that Dakota High School received the most counts or votes through your force matrix, followed by Central High School, followed by Voyager, followed by Agnes Galene High School, and then in fifth place, Valley High School. So as you can see, I could keep reading if you want me to go through all 26 spots, but those were the top 5: Dakota, Central, Voyager, Agnes, and Valley.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions as we're looking at this breakout? It's very colorful. Okay, so Dakota, Central, Voyager, Agnes, Gielan, and Valley High School are the top 5. And that was our goal, was to narrow the list down from, what, we had 26, is that correct? 26 to 5. And so we've done that. And would there be, it would be wonderful, I think, to have a motion that these are the 5 that we are moving forward. Is there someone that would like to make a motion on that regard? Jim?
I move that we take the top 5 vote getters and move them on to the finalist selection that will happen at our next board meeting.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion by Jim and a second by Seth to move the top 5 on to our next board meeting. And then again, the top 5 are Dakota, Central, Voyager, Agnes, Gielan, and Valley. Anyone have any comments? Are there any questions? Any discussion? Rupak.
This is just a suggestion for board members. This is not meant to impact your voting in the future in any way. Just talking to Mr. Berkman and some of the conversations I've had since I've started my role with the Fargo Public Schools Foundation, I would just encourage the board prior to the next meeting, before you narrow names, if Central is going to be on the name for consideration, to reach out to the Central High School Foundation. They have historically, that foundation has not chosen for whatever reasons to merge with our Fargo Public Schools Foundation, and always kind of appreciated their autonomy and independence. So to use that name again for another school, I would just encourage you to reach out to that group before your further votes.
All right, thank you for mentioning that. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Robin and Nikki, do you have anything to share at this point before we vote?
This is Robin. No, thank you.
And Nikki, I'm gathering you don't have any questions or comments either?
Nope, sorry, I spoke at the same time Robin did. I'm good.
That's okay, it happens. So, Anne Marie, I guess you could call the roll.
Robin Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Gullickson?
Yes.
Holden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
President Knutson?
Yes. Motion passes. So now we have 5 names that we will be taking to our next meeting. So I encourage us to take into consideration the information that Dr. Gandhi shared with us, and any research and any feedback that we might get from our community members moving forward. So we're ready to narrow it down to that one name at our next meeting. Moving on to board reports, committee liaison and correspondence reports. I am going, let's see, Tracy, why don't you go ahead and start, and we'll just work our way around the table.
Yeah, sounds good. First of all, congratulations to Jim. That was very cool for you to receive that honor. It was fun to be here and get to see that. On November 12th, we had the meeting with Fargo Public Schools and West Fargo Public Schools and Public Health, and myself and Dr. Carson. That was very lucrative and good. November 16th, we had the COVID-19 Instructional Plan Committee meeting. On the 17th, we had the local educators breakfast with GAC. It was virtual this year. It's my first time doing one of these, but I think it went really well. Dr. Gandhi and myself presented, and Robin moderated, and I think it was a success. November 18th, I attended the NDSBA Lunch and Learn for FMSCA updates for bus drivers and schools. November 20th, we had the Fargo CAS Board of Health meeting. And then yesterday morning, we had the Communication, Advocacy, and Engagement Committee meeting. I've done a few interviews with the media. Most recently, I did an interview with John Hagman from North Dakota Newspaper Association regarding COVID-19 in our schools. I'll be writing a second piece for the December 3rd newsletter around boundaries. No, just kidding. Of course, it's around COVID. And to end on a fun note, my 5th grade daughter, who is the apple of my eye, she has applied to be on the state superintendent student cabinet for the 2020 through 2022 school year. I don't know if she'll be accepted, but I'll stay tuned. I'll keep you guys posted. Kind of fun. She was interested. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. Seth?
On the 18th, I had my first CTE board meeting, and it was very interesting to learn some of the funding things that are going on with CTE and how it started in the 2014-15 year. I believe it was 75% state funding, and now it's down to 40%. So I'm hoping that this legislative session that we can at least, at the very least, keep it at the 40, if not increase it a little bit if we could. But I guess we'll see about that. And on the 23rd, we had a CEA meeting, and I had to have my first experience of chairing a committee meeting. That was great. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Before I forget, let's go to Robin and Nikki. Robin.
Thank you. On November 12th, I was a guest on a radio show to talk about my comments from the board meeting prior. On November 16th, I view the COVID Instructional Plan Call Committee to fulfill my duties as an alternate. On November 17th, as earlier mentioned, we had a legislator informational meeting. We had 7 senators and 7 House members respond. During that meeting, we provided district info, legislative priorities, and also a COVID update. So thank you to Dr. Newman and Dr. Gandhi for doing that. On November 19th, I attended the Governance Committee. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Nikki.
Thank you. This is Nikki. A quick update from Communications, Engagement, and Advocacy. As has been alluded to earlier this evening, we have a few upcoming articles in the works. Tracy is graciously going to put together another COVID article for us. So watch for that coming forward in the journey. And Rebecca is planning at some point in the future here, not too far away, a boundaries article on hows and whys there. And then David and I are going to be working on an article to kind of introduce or to talk about the negotiations process that's upcoming. On a personal note, November 17th, I attended the local legislator event, which was very interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The 19th was the governance meeting, and the 23rd, of course, as I just said, was the CEA committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. So November 9th was planning. I also attended the local GAC organized Zoom with the local event, that Nikki just referenced. And CAE, I was there for the November 23rd meeting. I have also been attending via, login to the governance meetings. And I guess I'd like to say that perhaps we could, or make a suggestion that we take those things that are considered or included under policy considerations, which aren't all being discussed at governance. The most recent example being on EL 11, which will come next meeting, but an opportunity for us to work to get our policies closer to align with basically governance structured model that we've been talking about. And I think even it had been suggested from both Aspen and Carver to really work through our policies at a work session. And so I just kind of wanted to take this opportunity because I feel like in dialing in and listening in, those suggestions aren't really being discussed or vetted. And really it would be a good discussion for the full board to partake in. So just for consideration to be added to a work session opportunity. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. David?
I attended governance on the 19th.
Jim? We cannot hear you, Jim.
I too was at governance, and I attended the Zoom legislative breakfast. Thank you to Robin and the staff that coordinated that. I thought it went really well. I had a health insurance committee meeting on November 17th. We looked at our claim data year to date, which is looking actually fairly good. We're not too far in the red anywhere. We talked about a couple of new programs that might get consideration to be added in the future. And we're going to put out an RFP to get competitive bids for the coming year. And our representatives at Gallagher and Group are going to look at a couple of other structural changes that committee members had asked to have them look into, just to see what exactly we have for flexibilities in plan design. And planning is, I think, meeting next Friday on December 4th at 7:30 at the district office. That's it.
All right, thank you, Jim. Brian?
Nothing to report, just to thank Jennifer for your report. That was great. COVID committee, thank you for what you're doing and continuing to stay in the course and trying to find out the necessary information to, what to do. And then just publicly thank Jim, knowing you for 20 years and what you've done for the Fargo Public Schools, all the work you've done for our schools in the whole state under NDSBA. Do appreciate your work, so thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brian. There's a president's report at your chair. There is a, let's see here, I wanted to mention, first of all, December 17th at 7:30 a.m. is the next governance committee meeting. So Jennifer, you mentioned a couple of items that you might be interested in discussing. I just wanted to let board members know if there's anything that you want to have put on that agenda. Just feel free to let me know, of course, like usual, but just wanted to let you know that, just a reminder, I guess, for some practice there. I was at the CEA meeting on the 23rd, the instructional plan committee meeting, listened in on the 16th. The Native American Commission meets December 3rd. The Core Neighborhood Steering Committee meets the week of December 14th. Last evening, Jennifer Mastrud and I spent some time on the phone and discussing a variety of the items that we shared at our meeting here today. So thank you, Jennifer, for your time, and we'll work on getting our next meeting or our next phone call set up. And yes, I felt like the Zoom session with our legislators went really well. Nice to have that participation and good opportunity to be able to discuss our priorities with them and answer some questions that they had. So that is all I have for this evening. I think that takes us through the agenda. Our next meeting is December 8th. Just want to thank everyone really for the work regarding the Woodrow Wilson naming, and our following our policy and, just sticking with it and being methodical and seeing the results of the forced ranking matrix, how it comes up, and for all of us to be supportive, as we move through this process, depending upon how we voted and if any one of your top ended up being in the top 5 or not. We're moving through this as a community with community input and thanking the community for being involved. So with that, we can adjourn. I think it is 7:55. Thank you and have a great night.